Honourable for St. Giles North.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to intervene and make a contribution in this very important debate on the National Policy on Aging, which is a 5-year policy, 2023 to 2028, and to, at the outset, say that I agree with the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister that there's this policy document, crafted by Dr. Drain Devenish from our university. Same author of, in fact, the National Policy on Disabilities, which Cabinet also approved about a year ago. But while you have a policy on a document, a lot has gone on for the elderly, and let's define elderly by meaning persons over 65 since this administration has come into office in May 2018. So you have to look at it within the context of everything else that has been done. So for example, within a few weeks of us coming into office in May 2018, this administration raised non-contributory pensions for persons over 8 for senior citizens from $155 to $225 every fortnight. A very large percentage increase, over 50%. Of course, we would have had in the financial and budgetary statement this year by the Honourable Prime Minister the proposal to have the Ministry of People's Empowerment establish, I think it is 13 centres for the elderly daycare centres across Barbados over the next few years. I believe certainly one is to be started this financial year. And this is very important because it will be a means by which senior citizens can keep mentally active, which is very important to keep their agility in the face of all the challenges of life. So a lot has been done, and it has to be looked at within that context, since, as Mahatma Gandhi said, a society has to be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable people. And the elderly of any society are among the most vulnerable. I will speak, sir, mainly within the context of elderly persons with disabilities, and I will also propose some legislative changes which should certainly, in my opinion, be considered. But for Barbados, there's been, as we know, and as the aging policy document speaks to, an increase of 2.3 years in life expectancy after age 60 between 1990 and 2017. But however, the increase in terms of healthy life expectancy during that period has only increased by 1.6 years. So people are living longer in our country, but in a lot of cases they're not as healthy, and they're deteriorating in terms of their physical capacity, gaining disabilities in terms of dementia, Alzheimer's. I think there was a report in 2013, I don't know, of the more recent figures, that about 4,000 persons in Barbados over age 60 had dementia. And I'm very familiar with that, sir, because and the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister spoke about her experience with her mum. My dad lived with dementia the last 6 or 7 years of his life. And just as the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister said, you know, my mum and I had no choice but to put him in a nursing home the last 2 years of his life. If not, my mum may have been the one to go first, and she's still alive. So this is a real issue, because the longer you live, obviously, the more likelihood you're going to get dementia, Alzheimer's disease, the more likely you're going to get physical disabilities, your sight, you might lose, deafness, your mobility. And all of this is tied in, and any caring government has a duty to address these situations. The APAHO study in 2019 reported that the prevalence of severe disability among older people in Barbados was projected to reach 7.53% in 2020, with those persons needing long-term care services. And we know this for a fact. The figure is, I'm sure, higher than 7.53 now, 5 years after. And this presents a real challenge to us. In some countries, the more developed countries, persons are actually paid a salary and income to caretake their elderly relatives at home. And this is an aim that we would want to achieve sometime in the future. We perhaps don't have the financial resources to do that, where a relative stops home and caregives for you. But this government has done its best substitute in the circumstances in that regard by employing more care of the elderly workers through the Ministry of People's Empowerment to look after elderly people. That was precipitated to a large degree by COVID, as we all know, a few years back, where about 450 persons were employed in that capacity throughout the island. And of course, we have workers from the National Assistance Board doing the same thing in terms of looking after elderly persons during the day, coming in their houses, cooking for them, making sure the house is clean. I think in some cases, bathing them as well. And that's the substitute. And this government has certainly looked after many old persons who otherwise may have been at home by themselves while their relatives who lived with them were working. So it is not only a policy document in writing, but a living policy which has been activated and actualized by this government. The issue also is that our 2010 census, because I know our latest census, 2020, which was done in a large measure during COVID, did not give this figure, but our 2010 census found that persons over age 65 years old in Barbados represented 48%, almost half of the total persons with disabilities or major impairments. So over about half, and I'm sure it's perhaps more now, about half or even more of the people with disabilities or major physical impairments in this country are persons who are senior citizens of this country. And issues certainly flow from that. And every aspect of society, of governance, pertains and relates to these persons. So you have issue of non-insurance or lack of insurance on housing owned by senior citizens to a large degree. And we know that that is a problem, especially during times like these, the 6 months of the year that we are subject to a hurricane season. And this issue, Mr. Speaker, has troubled but not been resolved by administrations, perhaps I believe for the last 50 years. I remember the administration of the Right Honourable Tom Adams speaking about how we as a country, we as a society, we as a government should address the issue of lack of insurance for the majority of our houses, for the vast majority of our houses which are vulnerable and susceptible to damage and destruction during adverse weather conditions. And it is perhaps a situation where the administration can look initially at trying to see how houses for the most vulnerable, houses for senior citizens, especially senior citizens with disabilities, senior citizens who live by themselves, could be insured and therefore gain some protection in the event that they were destroyed or damaged during adverse weather conditions. Because it would more pay, it will be better financially feasible to perhaps have some insurance system, state-funded insurance system for these properties than a risk comes about that they are destroyed during a hurricane, like what happened during Hurricane Elsa, and then the government, even though it is under no legal liability or commitment to do so, goes and repairs and replaces hundreds of houses at millions of dollars cost. The issue as well of reshaping the physical and built environment to accommodate senior citizens comes into play in discussion on this policy because senior citizens, those senior citizens with disabilities, have the right as any other citizen of Barbados to traverse all areas of this country. And the question also comes into play. A lot of people, they may be living in two-story houses, and again, the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister alluded to this. They may be living in two-story houses, upstairs houses when they're younger, but when they get older and their mobility decreases, the question then arises, boy, how do you get to your bedroom, which is upstairs all the time? And the issue comes about to trying to retrofit some part of the house downstairs to be a bedroom. Here, sir, the question of reverse mortgages really needs to be considered. They've been talking for years about bringing in a legislative regime to accommodate reverse mortgages, and the Honourable Member for St. James South mentioned about reverse mortgages this morning, but I'm going on to expand the issue. The proposal for reverse mortgages and the establishment of such through the creation of a legislative regime is in the 2018 manifesto of our party, so the Barbados Labour Party. It wasn't in the last manifesto, but I think that it is certainly an issue that the time has come for us to look at. And I want to urge Cabinet to seriously consider this, because we know that there's a cadre of people in this country who are perhaps recognized to be middle income in terms of economic class, but quite honestly, they might be asset comfortable because they have their own home, which is no longer mortgaged, but they may be cash poor. And because their pension may not be as sufficient in some cases to sustain the previous life that they had when they were working. And the issue, therefore, of them being able to mortgage the equity in their home to get cash comes into play. And I really believe that that's something that this administration needs to look at seriously. As I said, it was in our earlier manifesto up to 2018. Issues such as financial abuse of the elderly, and of course this resolution speaks about that in terms of its language, and this is very important. I know that the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, both in and out of her capacity as consultant to the Ministry of People and Empowerment on Elderly Affairs, spoken regularly on this issue, abuse of our elderly persons by their younger relatives. And if it needs legislative regime, I know, sir, it is difficult to have to legislate on everything that quite honestly should be just moral issues. And people need to do what is right and refrain from doing what is wrong. So, trying to rob your elderly relative now out of money, that they work hard for and that you didn't work for, quite honestly, it's totally immoral, and in my opinion should be subject to criminal penalties. And that's something that I know that the administration has spoken about in terms of bringing legislation to address that, but I would want to urge that such legislation be looked at in greater detail and with greater urgency. Also, in terms of legislative reform, sir, I would wish to propose, and I know that the Ministry of People's Empowerment has considered it. I don't know how far it has got in its consideration, but reform of the regime of receivership under the mental health legislation, whereby, as the law presently stands, it is quite costly in terms of legal expenses for a relative to go to court where the person who they look after no longer has mental capacity to make decisions relating to their personal or financial life. And you have to go to court to get the court to make an order that you become the receiver. Again, I know the experience. I've done many in terms of my legal practice, including my own father, where my mother and I went to court when he had dementia to become his receivers. And this is an area that needs reform. Tied in with this, sir, is the need for enduring power of attorneys, which they have in the United Kingdom and in Ireland. And I know that the Law Reform Commission, which is doing tremendous work under Sir David Simmons, former Attorney General, former Chief Justice of Barbados, and I know that the Law Reform Commission would be happy to assist in terms of bringing in legislation on enduring powers of attorney. Because as you well know, sir, right now, but a lot of people, who are not lawyers perhaps don't know that you have power of attorneys, of course, but when the person who gave the power, the grantor, becomes mentally unfit, again gets Alzheimer's, dementia, that power of attorney is no longer valid. But under an enduring power of attorney, the situation where that the power of attorney given can continue even when the grantor is unable to make decisions relating to their personal affairs or to their health or to their financial or property matters. So again, that's something that I would hope that the administration, cabinet, the Ministry of People's Empowerment would look at, because it will make, all of this will make life easier in terms of legislative regime for senior citizens, those who lose their mental capacity. We look forward to the new geriatric hospital being completed, but as has been said earlier today, sir, the government of Barbados, the state, will never be able to accommodate all the persons whose relatives would wish for them to be in state institutions such as the geriatric hospital. It's impossible. So it's good, I believe, that the new geriatric hospital going up in the Hoddesdon area, the Bell area, would have a capacity, I believe, 600 odd, about 600 persons. But the state can't do everything. The state is trying its best. That is the truth. But we all, I'm sure, as members of Parliament, are called on by constituents to see if we can get them in the geriatric hospital, something that is impossible. So again, the best that we can do is alternative care for the elderly program. And again, that was promised in our 2018 elections manifesto. It's set out there that we will seek to establish and promote more alternative care for the elderly programs to include situations where the state would subsidize the senior citizen who is no longer able to be looked after at home in private elderly care homes. And I know there's that provision for it. I'm not so sure that it is fully financed. I believe that it's through the Ministry of Health that the finances go, and there's provision for the pension of the individual to go towards their nursing care within the private nursing home, because I believe now I'm hearing sums of about $3,500 a month for this care. I know when my dad was there and alive, I believe it was about $2,500. It's about $3,500 now. So the question then arises for the state to have a fund whereby more persons who meet the criteria of going in such a nursing home, private, who can't be accommodated at the geriatric hospitals, where the state is able to subsidize some more of those persons. And again, it is something that I urge respectfully the administration to look at in more detail so it could be more widespread. Because we all know, look, our population, we've said it over and over again, is aging continuously. And that's a credit to our society. It's a credit to our medical service providers. As the Honourable Member for St. Michael North spoke of this morning, our Minister of State in the Ministry of Health, that be able to be looked after these days, and obviously the science of the world too, and medications, that we're living longer. But with living longer, of course, it has its challenges. The issue, as the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister spoke of, parking for senior citizens who have disabilities is an everyday challenge, sir. And I believe that the Ministry of Public Works is looking at increasing the fines for that. It is $500 now for breach of, for someone who doesn't have a disability, parking in car parks, whether government or private, which are reserved for persons with disabilities. And I trust that the increase in penalty, and not only the increase in penalty, but then the implementation and the carrying out of the penalty for those who are in breach of it can come about in the foreseeable future, because it's frustrating people with disabilities every day that people who have no disability are parking in spots reserved for them, and when you tell them something, they won't tell you about yourself or your parents that you never knew about. So again, sir, these are some of the legislative proposals that I would wish to make as someone who obviously has an interest in senior citizens, especially those with disabilities. The issue of reform of national insurance, the social security regime, which is also mentioned in this resolution, financial and social security, that's one of the 8 planks, was addressed last year. by the Honourable Minister of Labour, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and we have that reform. And it had to come about, sir, because, as I said, our aging population, our birth rate declining, and our population declining. And Barbados is not unique in this sphere. Or in many, many countries in the world facing this same problem of declining birth rates. So, for instance, China has recently, I don't think it's implemented yet, but they are proposing, and they will soon be doing, increasing the age, the retirement age by 3 years each for men and for women. Men from 60 to 63, women from 55 to 58, to address this issue, because even though China, of course, has 1.4 billion people, its birth rate is declining as well, and their population is said to be in a bit of decline as well. And on that score, sir, China, it was interesting to see how China treats towards its persons with disabilities and its older people, seeking still to obviously involve them in society and in decision making. So something which has to be done, as has been said in here by more than one contributor to this debate, more than one honourable member. We have to respect our elders, sir. And just wanted to, as the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister said, you know, this is the place where it's put on record in Hansard, where you have to clear up misconceptions. And what is taking place in the Democratic Labour Party, sir, some people may say, well, that is their business, sir. But it has to be of concern to all of us as right-thinking, patriotic Barbadians. And the Honourable Leader of the Opposition on, I suppose, a rebound from the disaster, because to use the word disaster, quite honestly, is to use a mild word. But the disaster of a conference that they had just a month ago, gave a press conference, I think about 5 days after, in which he made the assertion that the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, Senator in the other place, Senator Gregory Nichols, and I went first class to China on a plane paid for by the taxpayers to talk about a one China policy. I mean, I don't know why the Honourable Leader of the Opposition wants to involve me in his fracas and his chaos that he has brought, increased it in the Democratic Labour Party. And as I did before on the cybercrime issue, the hearings, I have to do now an absolute and total and abject falsehood. And again, I have to express, quite honestly, absolute disappointment that someone who is a senior attorney at law, right, could make these kind of assertions in public, not caring whether they're true or not, with reckless disregard, not checking facts, and the facts are there to be checked, because you could easily just call the Parliament here, Clerk of Parliament, the Secretary of Parliament, and find out. We were funded by the government of the People's Republic of China. Totally playing fair, accommodation, everything. Taxpayers of Barbados didn't have to pay. And it wasn't anything but one China policy. And even to say that is, quite honestly, a disgrace as well to the party of which he is now a member again for the third time, because that political party in government has, just as the Barbados Labour Party, recognized a one China policy from the time we established it in 1977. So, I mean, to fly that off now like if it is some joke, is quite honestly a disgrace to our international affairs. And the fact that Barbados was invited to this conference even in the first place, which was sponsored by the People's Republic of China and by the Interparliamentary Union, as you know, sir, a global institution that Barbados is not even a member of, but that Barbados is invited to this conference, one of 33 countries to be invited, speaks towards the international standing now, high international standing that Barbados has, largely through our Honourable Prime Minister, sir, let's face fact, but also through the fact of all the parliamentarians here who travel and who speak and who conduct themselves with tremendous pomp and intelligence in international affairs. And a conference on sustainable development goals, which relates as well to elderly people, which relates to everybody, because we are fully into achieving these sustainable development goals, sir, and we have set that target as well, and that's what the conference is on. So for the opposition leader to go in his usual style of entertainment to try to create now, I don't know, hysteria and noise among whoever on something that is totally incredulous and totally false. It's quite honestly a disgrace to the office which he holds, sir. And any time, sir, that the leader of the opposition speaks in these terms and in this frivolity and in this inaccurate term, recklessly, because you don't know the facts, but you say it because you're trying to create problems, I will respond in this parliament to it, because it is a dishonor to us all as people elected to serve. So I learned early o'clock that you only have integrity and credibility in public life. You can't pay for it. There's no dollar figure on it. And when you lose it, or when you don't have it in the first place, anyhow, you're in problems. You can't get it back. And I have certainly tried to conduct myself with credibility in any public office I've held in respect of the people of Barbados. And I continue to be absolutely disappointed that a leader of the opposition holding extremely high public office in this country continues to spin inaccuracies in the public domain in substitute for how he is leading the alternative party and how he has brought it to absolute disgrace. Up to today, another member in senior office resigning because of the treatment that they received at that conference 4 weeks ago. So, Mr. Speaker, I fully support this resolution, and I look forward to this administration continuing to carry out policies and programs that will better and improve and make life more comfortable for our senior citizens in this country, those who have prepared the way for us to be here and to have a better life for our people. I'm obliged to you, sir.